We're live. Hi, everybody, and welcome to P&P Live. Thank you so much for joining us in this new format where we can continue to bring authors and their books to the politics and prose community. As this is a new venture, please, we thank you for being patient with us as we work through all the difficulties and get more comfortable with this new platform. A few items before we begin. At any time during this event, you can click on the green button on your screen to purchase tonight's book on the Politics and Prose website. We're currently offering free media mail shipping on all orders, and your online purchase goes to support our small business at an uncertain time when we rely on you, our most loyal customers, more than ever. Just like at our in-person events, tonight you're able to ask the author a question by clicking on Ask a Question near the bottom of your screen. There you can submit your question as well as read others' questions and even vote for ones you'd like to hear answered the most with the up and down arrows. A reminder that unlike our in-person events, the author, host, and audience members cannot see you through your screen, so we welcome you tonight in your pajamas. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for your continued support. Right now, small businesses, especially bookstores, are vulnerable. We are dedicated to still bringing you the high-quality content we're known for, and every purchase counts in keeping us afloat. On to tonight's event. Jezewska Stevens' work has appeared in the Paris Review, Tin House, Harper's Blog, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and many more. Her debut novel, The Exhibition of Persephone Q, puzzles with the problem of self-ownership in times of crisis. Tonight, Jessi is joined in conversation by Emily Mitchell, author of the novel, The Last Summer of the World, and story collection, Viral, also available for purchase on the Politics and Prose website. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to bring Jessi and Emily to your screens.
Okay. Thank you so much, Beth. All right, so we're on? Okay. Emily, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
Okay, perfect, and we can hear you. So Emily and I, like everyone else, are new to this, so if we have any technical difficulties, we're going to call each other and do the best that we can that way. So Emily, can I hang up for now?
Yeah, that would be fine. All right, speak to you soon.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much to Politics and Prose for hosting us. Thank you so much to Emily for joining me. I feel maybe more nervous doing this online than in a bookstore, but I am so glad to take a break from the news cycle and join you here. So I'm going to read an abbreviated version of the first chapter, and normally I wouldn't give much of a preamble to a reading, but my book is set in another urban landscape and crisis, New York, just immediately after 9/11, and I know that many of us have been thinking about the ways in which that moment does or doesn't echo our current one. So I thought that seemed important to mention before we begin. And so I'm going to do a quick reading, Emily and I will chat, and we'll open it up to audience questions. One night, I woke up to find I no longer recognized my husband. The room was dark and still and blue. The computer in the kitchen glowed. I had woken, as I sometimes do, in a fit of desire that was usually reciprocated, as if Misha and I were wired to the same internal alarm. We woke up as one. This was often when we began to make love. We reached for each other through the film of separate dreams and then fell back in states of mutual surprise, non-verbally affirmed. That night, however, he slept. The thin light spilled through the air shaft and onto our bed, and in it he looked strange. Not less attractive, if anything, more so, but also not quite like the man I buried not so long ago. His chin was slack, his brow furrowed with some small concern. I rubbed my eyes. Misha was older than I was by only a few months, but in that moment it seemed a whole decade had intervened. He reached out to touch his cheek across a stretch of time. He didn't stir. I reached out to touch his cheek across a stretch of time. He didn't stir. He always was a wonderful sleeper. On trains, in waiting rooms, sprawled across the slanted floorboards as he lay down to perform the stretches the chiropractor had prescribed for his back. Once, in July, when all the stores were filled with crowds, I left him at the deli counter to wait for me, and when I returned, I found him dozing on a stool before the domed cases of salads and cold cuts and spreads, our order boxes priced and wrapped. I tugged at the string on his sleeve. Then he hadn't stood, and I felt frustrated and alone, all on my own in the crush of the holiday crowd, freighted with grapes and milk and womanhood. I was embarrassed to find how much I cared about what the deli men would think, how to get the ice cream home. Really, I thought, is this the sort of woman you become? I felt similarly disappointed in my humorlessness now, in bed, where Misha lay unresponsive to stimuli. I imagined what I'd say to him come morning. You were out cold. Nothing doing. He loved his idioms. I shifted in the sheets. I said his name, though I don't know what I would have done if he'd woken up. I had no agenda. It seemed to me that if only he moved or responded, then everything would be as it was before. I could go back to sleep. For now, I missed him acutely. I touched his face. My fingers skated across the hard, hot plane of his cheek, down the bridge of his nose. Then, in a small and violent impulse I still don't understand, I pinched his airways closed. I am not a violent person. When I was a girl, my father often told me I ought to stick up for myself a little more. I remember he used to try to wrestle with me to impart the importance of self-defense, ignite in me some passion for survival. The only move I ever really mastered was to twist against the thumb whenever an attacker grabbed my wrist, and after this, to run. Misha, too, felt distressed by my lack of indignation. I was like damp wood that will not spark, he said, no matter the heat applied. Once, while we were walking along Central Park after dinner, a child stole my purse. I watched him dash away down the street, his small red cap tracing a lovely bouncing pattern along the gray stone of the boundary wall, like a paintbrush loaded with red paint. Misha threw up his arms in exasperation. What was I doing? Run. But I stood still and calmly stunned, watching the red cap fade. It didn't seem important enough. This is all to say I was surprised as anyone by the situation I found myself in now. I pinched Misha's nostrils. He held his breath. I waited for him to wake, protest, and then I didn't know. It was as if the two of us had been reversed, because, to my amazement, Misha did not struggle. He did not inhale and fight or push away, never opened his mouth to gulp. I held on for a few seconds, a minute, two, I don't know how long. The blood mounted quietly in my ears. Still he did not stir. I don't know which of us frightened me more, Misha or myself. Then a door slammed down the hall, footsteps dissipated on the stairs. I watched my hand float away from Misha's face. I slunk out of the bed, to the edge of the room, into the corner of my kitchenette, the farthest possible point from my husband, in case that unbidden impulse tried to exercise itself again. I hovered in the dark. I felt slightly lifted out of myself, like an acrobat suspended just above the stage. The waste bin stood solemnly in shadow. I raised the lid. The test was there among the rest of the trash, brandishing its positive result. I was 6 weeks pregnant, more or less. I looked across the room at Misha. What a way to begin, I thought. I hadn't even told him yet. I am fully aware that Misha's and my decision to marry did strike the people close to us as rash. We'd tied the knot only recently, in late October, when Lower Manhattan opened its gates to the general public again. I checked my horoscope. The day was a success for love. Other people must have felt the same. At City Hall, the queue spilled through the doors and onto the municipal steps, and I felt at one with the crowd, which I imagined to have gathered, like us, on the wind of proposals not yet 24 hours old. Traffic cones were placed every which way. Trees released poison leaves to the green. A light northward breeze perfumed the air with drywall dust and soot. The proceedings were efficient, almost abrupt. The witness clapped when Misha and I exchanged our tarnished rings that Misha himself had found buried in the Rockaway sands. And it was only then, as we were emerging from the courthouse, hand in hand, that I felt the first stirrings of surprise. I looked around. There ought to be some other cue to join, I thought, for the only just married. But there were no forms to fill, no more lines in which to stand. We were free to go. I took Misha's arm. The nebula, only recently conceived, would have also been present then. My narrator refers to her unborn child as the nebula. At the time, I'd known Misha all of 4 months, long enough to understand that he was not, as they say, all there. Then again, neither was I. I was suspicious of anyone who still claimed a stake in normal. Who was to say what constituted all there? We looked south and saw the great capped tooth against the gullet of the sky. I admired the way Misha sank beneath the surface of the day to reach a deeper kind of calm. He carried a metal detector as casually as it came, rode the train to the end of the line to sift through the tiny treasure of the Rockaways like some Norwegian oyster for prey. He eschewed mail order, raffle, instant messages. They'll steal your data, he said, and spent afternoons over the altar of the keyboard, tapping out lines of code. He lay motionless on the floor for hours, thinking up new problems to solve, as is the habit of a mathematics PhD. I respected it. Though it raised questions of an epistemological nature. Did the problems already exist before Misha articulated them, or did he instead conjure them into being, ipso facto making the world more problematic than before? Be careful of karmic balance, I warned. My psychic says. Misha cut me off. I know what your psychic says. I will point out to her that I am solving your problems all the time. This was true. I was often a problem to solve. For 33 years, I've been bringing problems into the world simply by breathing and responding stimulantly. Misha calmed me down. That is, used to, until the night has slumbered from me an aggression that, to this day, I can't recognize as my own. At night, I slipped out of bed, across the floor, took my keys to the hook. I didn't trust myself to be in the room. Okay. Okay. Emily is going to call me with questions. Hi, Emily.
Hi. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay. I have some questions that I have been wanting to ask you ever since I read the novel. After that, as Beth may have announced, we'll open up to a Q&A from the audience. Maybe we could just begin with with the beginning of the novel, which I found extremely interesting. Partly because what the main character does at the start of the novel is such a small act, but it does have these potentially devastating consequences. And then she herself also doesn't know why she's doing it. And I wonder maybe if you could talk about when in the writing process that beginning evolved. Did the novel always start this way, or did it come later in the process? How did that work for you in terms of the composition?
Yeah, I really struggled to find a beginning for this novel, and I had worked on it for, I would say, at least the first year before I had found this beginning.
Jessi, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I can't.
I had always had the
can't hear you.
conceit of the exhibition. So can you hear me?
She can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm going to speak into the phone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, that's much better. Thank you.
I'm going to take my earphones. Okay.
There's so many different kinds of technology to deal with.
I know.
Yeah, but please, Yeah. Please go ahead.
So yeah, I had always had the central conceit of the exhibition, and it did take me a long time, at least a year, to work my way towards the beginning. I knew that I couldn't start just with the discovery, or that didn't feel quite right in those early drafts. For those who haven't read the novel, at the center of the book is a photography exhibition, and our narrator, Percy, discovers that she is the woman featured in this photography exhibition. Only no one else believes her when she claims to be that woman. And I was really struggling to lead up to that. And I actually remember I had this scene arrive later in the novel originally, and I was struggling to find the beginning. And I was actually visiting a friend, and she was working on a paper in Very Stuck, and I was working on this draft in Very Stuck. And I had told her about the scene, and she said, "Well, why don't you just start there?" And I did, and it cleared up many problems. So another writer friend had really helped me with that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that sometimes in a process of composition, someone comes along and makes a suggestion that is absolutely the right one, and it's exciting when that happens. So then the other thing that really struck me, there were a number of others, but one of the other things that really struck me is the setting and time of the book, which seems. It's set, the novel is set just after the events of September 11th, 2001. And that was something I also wondered about, how you came to that. And also how you see that very big public event resonating with the more personal aspects of the characters' experiences.
Yeah. So I started the book in just at the beginning of 2016, and to the extent that the novel is very much focused on questions of identity, who am I, what possibly even this nation might be, those questions felt extremely charged at that moment when I began the book, and it seems kind of an outsized ambition looking back on it, but I was thinking about how can I channel what I've seen in terms of a kind of national mood, possibly through an individual story. So that was all very much on my mind, and it occurred to me that in some ways, a kind of question, a cycle of questioning American identity was bookended a bit by 2001 and 2016, and I wondered if this other kind of crisis moment might actually foreground a very contemporary national mood, and that was how I had come to choose that setting, and I think in terms of Percy's personal narrative in the book, it's basically a quest narrative motivated by that question of who am I, and negotiating those moments when her answer to that question is not accepted by others. Others have different answers to that question, and the kind of juggling of different versions of reality and truth that posing that question can lead to, and also some of the confusion and the anxiety that those questions lead to as well.
Yeah, I mean, the novel seems to anticipate, I think, I mean, it clearly, deliberately, a lot of the things that were to come in, the 20 years that followed, or nearly 20 years that followed those events, particularly to do with this question of representation, and and the visual image and what that means to to have it be so easily reproducible, and so manipulable. And I found myself, and this leads into another question that I found myself wondering about, which had to do with influences, because as I was reading the novel, I couldn't help feeling and, and wondering about whether, say, Don DeLillo's interest in photographic and filmic representation was a part of the thinking that went into this, and then also, I think, because the novel suggests such a wide breadth of influences, I was wondering who were the writers that you had in mind, sort of both when you began the project, but then also, sort of as you continued to develop the novel, and did they change over time who you were thinking of as, as the major influences on what you were doing?
Yeah. I think my answer to who my influences are is always changing. And I do think I was thinking about this the other day as well, and I find myself really attracted to narratives that take place in claustrophobic domestic spaces, and also to the more historical picaresque. And if there happens to be a spectrum between those two genres, I maybe like to see myself on it. If I'm thinking about things that I was reading, the novel has a maybe not there's a bit of a framed novella at the center of the novel, so it has possibly a bit of a more unusual structure. And I know that at the time I had read portrait novels, Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, and the Portrait of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And both of those novels have these chapters that seem to break away from the style, the prose and narration style of the rest of the book. And in Dorian Gray, this chapter where it turns into a bit of a fairy tale, and this kind of dream right in the middle of an otherwise fairly realistic novel. So I had encountered those texts, and I was thinking a little bit about how can I give this novel some texture, how many different styles can I introduce. There were some blog posts, some chat rooms that also introduced some stylistic variation. So in terms of writers who I admire, I'm often thinking about in terms of this more domestic kind of more claustrophobic worlds. Elena Ferrante comes to mind, and DAA is a French writer, and then on the more historical, picaresque, slightly absurd, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison is a novel that I really love, and especially I was setting my novel in New York, a city that's written about, and I always have really admired the way that that novel, gives us permission to write about such a familiar city in a way that is in a slightly tilted realism. So influences from all over the map, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that really shows in the novel. The other writer I was thinking of was Jenny Offal, whose novel Department of Speculation is also a New York novel, and also told in vignettes, like the early section of your book. And I was very interested in the function of the section that I think you just called a novella, where the protagonist, maybe 2/3 of the way through the novel, narrates the story of her own background in a way, that is actually that gets performed within the novel. She's telling the story to somebody within the novel. And I wondered about, you're saying that part of that was, was an exploration of form on your part, but I was also interested in the question of what effect you were looking to have by delaying telling us that information about who she was and where she comes from, because she does, she comes across as a person who's very disconnected from her own background, from her own past. And then towards the end of the book, we get this whole section where she tells us really a lot about where she's coming from. And so I wonder if maybe you would just talk a little bit more about that particular choice.
Yeah. So I was thinking of that section as possibly another riff on this idea of the exhibition of Persephone and acute, because we get a very different play on that meaning of exhibition, where suddenly someone whose backstory has been suppressed for most of the novel, we suddenly get her whole life story. And I was thinking about what kind of person, what kind of character would become very obsessed with this idea of appearing in the exhibition, and become very obsessed with convincing others that her answer to that question, to that, to that question of who am I, and to have that statement, "This is me," to be ratified by those around her. I was thinking that would be someone who is possibly a bit in denial of other transformations in her life that Percy is a mother to be. She has married just after this very disruptive event, just after 9/11. And I think she is a person who is struggling with personal transformation and is in denial about some of those things. And the exhibition almost becomes something that she can fixate on. And to the extent that I was also thinking about so I think that kind of person is potentially not always in touch with the past. And to the extent that I was also thinking about a national state of mind, I was thinking about an American tendency towards amnesia, and what it means. Percy, I think, is very American in that she is very attracted to ideas of self-invention, self-reinvention. And part of that becomes, discarding the past in a way, or perhaps not giving as much weight to the past. And so I thought it would be interesting to have her live her life not so historically, and then to introduce that and to see how she changes if she gets to see herself as a more kind of historical being.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and it brings her, that tendency towards amnesia brings her into conflict with those around her. I mean, both, the central conflict, and then also, there's some of the secondary characters. I'm thinking about her friend Harold and his wife Claire, who who she has some trouble connecting with Claire in particular, because of her refusal to give up the past, right? Her refusal to relinquish her attachments. And I one of the aspects of the novel, which I thought was quite, remarkable, particularly for a book that is, that is so sleek and so spare in a lot of ways, was the cast of secondary characters that you generate. And I wonder, also, maybe another process question about how they evolved and where they came from.
Yeah, I think the The psychic was a discovery in later drafts. The and some of Percy's online interlocutors and chat rooms, the other women that she searches online, some of those were her discoveries as well. But the forecast of characters, the self-help author who Percy works for, and Harold and her neighbors, whose marriage seems to have, gone through a similar disruption as Misha and Percy's have. That were a cast of characters was there, and I was thinking about how we can see around Percy to echo her experiences, and to see how, whether or not she recognizes it, how others are perhaps experiencing similar moments of personal crisis and confusion. So
yeah,
and I know. So should we?
I was going to say let's go to Q&A now. So
Okay.
So I think that I'm now looking for some questions that ought to be forwarded to us on the screen. Hold on one second.
So I think, is it at the moment here?
Yeah, no, I see it now. I see it. Okay. All right. Well, so we have a question. Some novelists use people they know as models for their characters, not exact but recognizable. Is that something that you do?
Let's see. I don't know if I've ever dropped someone I actually know right into my fiction, but I do think that characters become collections of impressions and parts of people. So, and I guess parts of yourself as well. In a previous life, I studied math. Misha's a mathematician. In a previous life, I knew someone who was an avid metal detector enthusiast. So I think their characters become these composites of different elements of yourself. Maybe some of my characters, often the worst parts, and of other people that you know. So yeah, I'd say that the characters become composites.
Okay, so we have one more question. I'm interested in how you decided to nearly end the book with Buck, who's another minor character, who hadn't been a big part of the book until then.
Yeah. So this question is referring to there's a character named Buck who lives in Percy's neighborhood and has a bad scar on his face that he hasn't gotten checked, and everyone has been urging him. And at the very end of the novel, Percy escorts him to the hospital, almost tricks him into it a little bit, in order to seek this attention. And I was thinking about and trying to end the novel with that moment of care, and for a character who has spent a good part of the novel in a bit in denial, and perhaps not recognizing the intimacy in her life, to find this one of care towards the end. I think there's a good deal of neglect in the novel as well, especially on Percy's part. She neglects her husband. She sort of neglects her body and taking care of her child to be, and I think she doesn't always realize how harmful that can be. So for a character and a novel that has operated so much on neglect, I was hoping to end instead with that moment of care.
So we have a question also then about we have a question about the name Persephone Q. If she's not Persephone Q in the exhibit, why is she called Percy?
I think that we can see Percy Q as a name that our narrator has chosen for herself. Okay, I'm being told I should speak closer to the microphone. So we know that we don't know the narrator's real name for the duration of the novel. So we can assume that in telling us her story, she has chosen this name for herself. And I think that there is a tension here between Percy wanting to claim her identity and claim a subject position in relation to the pictures, and perhaps at the end of the novel, and if she's telling this in retrospect, perhaps she sees some distance between herself and the photographs. So taking on this nickname, this revision of Persephone Q to Percy Q is one way of signaling that.
Okay, and then it looks like we just have one more question here that has to do with somnambulance. When do you tend to sleep? How does somnambulance function in the book?
Yeah. The first part of that question was, when do I tend to sleep? I have dealt with insomnia personally, but I was also thinking about, I'm actually really glad this question came up, because I was thinking too about being awake versus being asleep, engaged with your life, being asleep in your own life. In the photographs at the center of the novel, the woman featured is also sleeping, even as in the background it seems that there are major changes happening that she's not noticing at all. So I wonder if one possible arc in the book is to see someone who was asleep becoming more awake, or who wasn't awake at the right time, or in right ways, redirecting their attentions.
Sorry, just hold your phone up. Just okay. Hey. So, do we have time for one more question? Because we have one more question I can ask you, which has to do with the images of the waves crashing on the beach. How did you come to that metaphor and view of the past?
I see. So I think this question is referring to a line that says something to the effect of, I saw the past as, waves crashing onto a beach, and the sand always shifting and renewing. I'm going to answer this question in a slightly roundabout way, which is that there's a lot of searching in the book. Misha is searching with his metal detector. He's often only finding trash. Percy is searching with early versions of the internet. And if there is a central question in the novel, who am I? Who could I become, or who could I be? I think there's a sense in which Percy's becoming more comfortable with the idea that perhaps those questions can't be answered, that there aren't always such stable answers. And I wonder if that line is something that's capturing this idea that our perceptions of ourselves are also often shifting. So.
Okay.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much to Jessi and to Emily for this lovely, very timely conversation. And thanks to you all listening at home, and thank you for your patience through these first few digital events. That wraps it up for this one. Another reminder that you can buy both Jessi and Emily's books with free shipping at the Politics and Prose website, which can be accessed at that green button down at the bottom of your screen. We thank you for being with us tonight. Your purchases are what's keeping our store in business and our events streaming right now. They're what's keeping us going, and you can follow Politics and Prose on Crowdcast right here for future events by clicking up the logo at the top of our screen. You can click on that and follow us there. Tomorrow we have Jesse Wegman and his new book, Let the People Pick the President, in conversation with the New York Times' Adam Liptak. We hope to see you then, and until then, stay well read, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessi. Thanks,
Yeah.
Emily.
Thank you so much, Emily.